So I now have the unenviable task of being the only person standing between you and your dinner. My name is Kirsty, I'm a Research and Insight Manager at EPMA, a social media agency. We work with clients across the whole range of different sectors, from working with Ladbrokes to working with supermarkets like Tesco, and even sort of risque brands like Durex. But I think that there's a lot of learnings that the racing and betting industry can actually take from different sectors, especially when it comes to social media. So I think all the other presentations that we've had so far kind of set everything in context, and social media isn't at the same level of development as perhaps we're talking about 40%. With social media, the integration isn't quite there so far. So, are bookmakers social? A few months ago, me and my team did a bit of research on some different bookmakers in Britain. An overwhelming response was, not yet. So we have a system whereby we use a kind of social search engine to identify all the conversations that are taking place about a brand online. So we make the conversations come from the brand itself or come from customers. We evaluate in context with the sector and in context with other sectors, whether that's a substantial level of conversation, and we call that reach. So the first part of the score in the columns there relates to the level of conversation and the influence of those conversations in social space. As you can see, William Hill came out on top. The second column is satisfaction, so we actually go through all of the results to determine whether people are saying positive, negative, or neutral things. And you might think that the level of satisfactions are quite low, but actually, if you've ever been onto Twitter to see what your customers are saying about you, then it's not always great, but the company itself is often about the fact that they didn't win. So, in terms of where we are with the sector, it seems that AdWords and affiliates are a really big part of how the industry promotes itself. The great thing about this is you have really clear models for what your cost per acquisition is. You know exactly what cost is placed on a click, you know exactly what your conversion rate is going to be, and it's all very sophisticated. With social media, we don't yet have those models. But affiliates themselves are actually becoming increasingly sophisticated, and we've seen that there's a lot of affiliates that are actually going out and doing social media themselves. They may be writing actual blog posts rather than just creating links. So at that point, the boundary starts to blur. And given the context of increasing market competition and decreasing footfall on the high street, the social media is the sort of next channel alongside mobile. But there's so many complications when it comes to actually marketing yourself in social media, and as a sector as a whole. So for example, minimum gambling ages vary by country, and in the case of America, sometimes even within different states, or the regulations are different. For example, in Portugal, there's different legal betting ages depending on whether you're a native or whether you're a visitor. In terms of social media, that creates certain implications and responsibilities, and that you have to limit the content and the audience of the content depending on who you're talking to and what country that you're doing it in. And as you know, in social media or on the internet, there's no borders, so that can be difficult. Platforms like Facebook, they also have their own terms and conditions, and they tell you what you can and can't do. And anyone that has any sort of dealings with Facebook will know that they're very strict when it comes to gambling and betting as a sector. But other restricted industries, for example, finance and healthcare, they also move very slowly in social media. But I would say that finance is maybe a sector which is a few steps ahead, and they've already started to embrace concepts like social gaming. The interesting thing for me is that although the sector isn't very externally social, and by that I mean that a lot of the different tools don't actually have presences on social sites, they're very internally social. So I don't have any up-to-date statistics, but I read that in 2008, 40% of bookmaker sites actually had live chat functionality within the site. Also, a lot of different sites have forums, and for example, within bingo in particular, the social element of the site is really a big selling point. So you already have the kind of social instinct. It's a matter of how you communicate that out with your site. There's also the issue of ethics as well, and something that we haven't really touched upon today in terms of gambling addiction and sort of the awareness of that. For me, I think in the context of social is quite interesting, because when it comes to gambling addiction, generally that means that the problem gambler doesn't talk to their friends or their family and they don't know about the problem. But social media is all about communication and sharing, and by bringing gambling into social networks and bringing it into people's everyday conversations, then maybe that could help challenge that stigma, and maybe that could be a more healthy way of looking at it. Social media represents an opportunity as well as a risk. And we've seen that search traffic over the last couple of years has massively increased, so a lot of your customers, they are going online. And we also see that search traffic changes day by day. And in contrast with other e-commerce sites, so for example with clothing sites in the UK, on a Saturday when people go to the high street to buy things, so they go out shopping with their friends or family, we see that online sales and search traffic goes down, but actually on a Saturday, within gambling, search traffic goes up. So searches are increasing, so there's more people that are actually looking for your content online, but in terms of ad spend, the internet still represents a very small proportion of overall expenditure within the sector, which is kind of interesting given that in terms of media consumption, people are watching less TV, they're listening to less radio, but the actual proportions of expenditure don't represent that. And I think it's perhaps because in the past it was considered that social media was kind of niche, but I think we've already established with our 800 million Facebook users that it's now mass market. So what do you actually have to do in social media that makes it so difficult? Social media means that their companies actually have to find a voice for themselves on social media. They have to decide what the company actually sounds like as if it was a person, and that can be really difficult. Also, how do you coordinate that across different areas of your business? If you're not just working in racing, you might be working across bingo, online casinos, there might be lots of different areas of business, so how do you submit that and how do you create that consistent brand value? Also, it challenges your organisational structure because it forces you to become content-led. And this is something that Rod was talking about earlier in terms of the great things that they're doing around horse racing and around having a horse that tweets, for example. But it forces you to change your mentality as to how you promote yourselves. And companies like Sky and Virgin, which are moving into this sector, they already have a head start because they're content companies, they're entertainment companies, and they already understand the mindset that we'll be talking about today. And also it creates these responsibilities that we were talking about before. You become responsible for what your customers are actually saying about your businesses. And that's 24/7, so you can be sued, or there's all sorts of legal implications there. And also once you start to engage with your customers, that creates certain expectations on their part.